Okay, with a small set.
Good morning. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Architectural Review Board for January 18th, 2018. Roll call, please.
Yes, good morning. Chair Firth? Chair Firth?
Yes. I'm sorry. I thought you were just saying good morning.
Good morning. Vice Chair Balte?
Present.
Board Member Thompson?
Present.
Board Member Guyer?
Here.
Board Member Liu?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now is the time for oral communications about any matter not on the agenda. So if you aren't here to talk about the 350 Sherman Avenue parking lot or the related EIR, now would be the time to let us know. Seeing none, we'll go on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Staff have anything? Anybody on the board want any changes? Okay, seeing none. City official reports, the transmittal of the ARB meeting schedules and attendance record, and administrative staff level architectural review approvals. I'm so glad we're not reviewing tree removals. Any comments or questions?
Chair Firth, we do need to make sure that we have members that are able to stay for the subcommittee.
I'll get to that in a second, yes. One of the things is subcommittee assignments. We have used various approaches to assign board members to work with staff and the applicant to deal with fairly fine, small details after the main recommendation's been made by the board. I've decided that I'd like to do this on a project basis. We have two projects today. One of them is a return of the Junior Museum and Zoo, and the other is 2120 Staunton Court, and Vice Chair Balte and Board Member Liu have volunteered for that one. Those two, I should say. So that brings us to the main agenda item for today, which is a public hearing on a proposal at 350 Sherman Avenue for a parking garage, a 40-foot tall parking garage with photovoltaic rooftop structure to provide 636 spaces to be built on an existing parking lot that's bounded by Ash, Birch, Sherman, and Jacaranda Lane. There are two items before us this morning related to this. The first is an opportunity to comment on the draft EIR that has been prepared for a larger project. That project includes this parking garage, an adjacent public safety building, and an ordinance that would change the city's zoning standards for public facilities throughout the city, which staff can tell us more about later. The document's available. It's also available online. The public comment period on this continues until February 22nd. So if you have thoughts after this meeting, you are welcome to send them in so that when the final EIR is prepared, it can take into consideration your thoughts. And the parking garage itself. The project, when it came to us last time, was both the parking garage and the public safety building. The public safety building did not meet with as much approval as the garage, so the projects have been split in terms of their ARB hearings. So today we'll just be looking at the parking garage, but staff plans to put them back together so that they will go to the city council as a unit in what, late March, early April? Is that the thought?
As soon as the EIR is certifiable.
And you get the other plan back to us for our comments. All right, well, the EIR won't be certified for a while yet. Okay, so I have a number of public comment cards. If you want to comment and you haven't submitted a card, please do. So let's hear from staff.
Okay, I'll be very brief. You did a good job of teeing up the project. With a draft EIR, the process is to receive comments, and then the consultant that the city has hired will be preparing responses to those comments in writing, and collectively those will go to the city council and along with the project. And the certification will be at the same time as the project. Both of the buildings, both of the sites are shared, presented with council for action on the project itself. So just that about the DEIR, we have been getting some comments. Those were forwarded to you as we've received them. There are some folks here today perhaps to speak to that. You have the revised set of plans. If anyone needs to see the prior plans, I tried to, in the staff report, provide contrasting images in the body of the report, but I do have an older set if anyone wants to look at that. And really, the staff has teed this up for approval. We are going to be modifying the record of land use action following the ARB's review in March is what's anticipated for the public safety building. Once we receive those plans, we'll get those to you. And then that single record of land use action would proceed to the city council. So I've prepared findings, draft findings for architectural review approval of this project. And so if you could take a look at those and weigh in, provide edits as needed. I'll let the applicant provide the images and their PowerPoint presentation, and staff is ready for questions. And here's Matt Raschke to project
First, are there any
manager.
questions before Matt begins? Go ahead. If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Matt Raschke. I'm a senior engineer with Public Works, and I'm the overall project manager for both this garage and the public safety building. As you might be aware, a staff report has been published for City Council on this coming Monday night to consider removal of the lowest basement level of this garage. That it's related to the costs and speed of construction for the overall project, and it'll be looking at the parking needs of the area, and council will have to deliberate on that item. But overall, that's the only change we're looking at. But we'd like to get at least conditional approval on the garage today, if possible. The garage is a critical path for the public safety building, which is overall looked at as one project under CEQA. We want to get the garage built and functional before we break ground on the public safety building to minimize parking impacts on the California Avenue Business District. And I think we heard Board Member Guerrier at the last meeting say that there was no reason to necessarily look at them architecturally as one project. So we heard you on that, and we're bringing back just the garage at this point because we're making some major changes to the public safety building that we'll be bringing you very soon. And I think I'm hoping that you like those changes and can also then subsequently approve that project. And today we have Mallory Kusenberry from Ross Drulis Kusenberry Architects to give the presentation, and we also have Ray Pendro from MIG. He's the environmental consultant for the EIR, and we also have Michelle Wendler from Awatri, the parking garage specialist, and I believe there's someone from Interstice, the landscape architect, to help answer any questions that you have on the project. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mallory to present his design.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for this opportunity to present for you. I also want to extend a great thank you to city staff and to key members of the Palo Alto Police Department and Fire Department for the tremendous support and effort that has gone into getting the project to where it is today. As you know, the city is embarking on the design of probably the largest investment in civic infrastructure since the construction of this very building that we're in. It's on the two lots that you see there, C6 and C7. As you said, Chair, in the intro, currently today we're only talking about half of that project, which is the garage portion on the left. We will come back to you subsequently once we redesign the public safety building for independent separate input on that. The last time we presented to you the garage to you was in October of last year, and we got detailed, extensive, and very helpful feedback on the project. There, as you alluded to, there was definitely a lot of support for the direction that the garage was going. General positive feedback included that, it's coming along nicely, it's a large building that'll look quite nice, the ash Sherman elevations are quite interesting, the design is almost there, close to being something that can be recommended or approved. There was also support for the integration of the PVs, the circulation of the interior flow of vehicles, as well as the landscape approach. At the same time, there was very constructive feedback that we received on areas that could use more work. And those included more attention to the Birch Street stair, which was good in concept, but needed to be developed. The idea of softening the look of the wall that's facing Birch Street, that it was too harsh, too massive. That the arcade on Ash was not needed, that we needed to look at maximizing parking, and that, as Matt alluded to, that the design of the garage and the PSB could be treated as independent elements. They didn't necessarily need to be one overall design. We heard you, we agree with your assessments, and we believe as a result we have a better building. During the time since we last met you, we have removed the arcade, we've added the parking back into that space, we've spent a lot of time coming up with a new concept for the staircase and the approach on the Birch Street side, and in addition, the areas that you liked around the perimeter of the building, the exterior components, we have further refined those and developed those, making those better as well. The building is a 636-car parking structure, 2 stories below grade, 4 stories above grade, with a level of PV photovoltaics on the roof that shade the top level of parking. We all agree that it is a relatively large building, but there are a lot of opportunities within the design of this building to still make it a good neighbor, still have it fit in to the neighborhood there. First of all, it's not as unprecedented in its scale. There are other buildings in the immediate environment that are of a similar size, similar scale. However, there also are a lot of opportunities with the design of the building to actually work with the fabric and orientation of the historic Cal Avenue retail district. Further, there are also a lot of opportunities to kind of build on and reinforce the more fine-grained, particulate pedestrian environment, both the landscape and textural environment of the Cal Avenue public realm. And these are kind of guiding forces that you'll see in the design you're going to see. We limited our palette in the design of this, focusing, in fact, more on things like light and shadow and how it plays in the building. Movement, in pedestrian movement of people, movement of vehicles, movement of the landscaping, and the movement of the sun, and how we reinforce that, as well as the landscape environment itself, the organic shade, color, smells that you get from that environment. The result being that the goal being a design that really weaves itself into the neighborhood in such a way that it feels like it belongs. It builds on the textures, the character, the qualities, the colors of the area. This is looking up Birch. You can see the garage through the eucalyptus trees there beyond. Or looking up Ash Street, that there's an opportunity to reinforce and build on, for instance, the pattern and colors of the Visa building beyond, but also some of the local, the smaller retail functions and office functions, such as the one on the left, where you can see the continuity of the structural members as they march up the street. So it's talking to both characters. Yes, we want it to be a good neighbor, but at the same time, we felt it's important in this design to give the garage a character of its own, an independent character. It's not a destination per se, but it is an important moment in kind of the sequence of daily activities. One strategy we used for that is the current redesign for the Birch Street stair as a feature element. We have introduced a basket weave of terracotta scrim outboard of the stairs that the role is to soften it, to provide color, to provide an organic material, which is actual clay material, and to offer, but the concrete wall that was behind is now a smooth steel trowel plaster surface that hosts the light and shadow that's going to play off of it and adds to a brighter ambient light feel in that space. This stair is going to be an important component. You'll notice it cascades down towards Cal Avenue, so people leaving their cars come down the stair toward the retail district. There are pedestrian inflections, the base of the stairs, the seating areas that are gracious and generous and actually are receptive and welcoming to pedestrian activities. You can sit on the stairs. If you look up at the top of the stairs, there's a gentleman at the top who's very proud about having walked all the way up there. The detailed activity that you see on that side, though, is not unique to that side. It carries all the way around in what we consider the syncopated elevational development, where surfaces slide past each other, they cast shadows on each other, and they start to play off each other. So there's a variety, a visual variety, as you move around the building, with an end result that the building actually feels more particulate, it feels more fine-grained than you would expect for a building of this scale. A couple of things I'll point out. This is a view from the corner of Ash on your left and Sherman goes off to the right. The re-entrant corner that we have offers an opportunity to reduce the mass at the corners. It's a strategy we use on all four sides. We've introduced a sand color instead of the gray. And then there's that, even though the arcade is gone, there's an opportunity to widen the pedestrian realm right at that corner for a little bit of seating, a little more generous pedestrian zone before the sidewalk narrows. Again, the other thing I'll point out in this view is this is the one view where we're actually representing the possible texture that comes from the ivy growing up the terracotta basket weave. The goal of the design is that it works independent of the ivy, and we see the ivy as more like a value add, that it brings a patina of time should it succeed and grow as we hope it will. This view from the corner of Birch on your right and Sherman on your left, I'll point out just a couple of things from this view. One is you can see the continuity of the basket weave of the terracotta fins as they wrap around the building, providing a visual variety but continuity for the garage. And the other thing I'll point out is the polycarbonate canopy that's over the stairs. It serves the role as you would have a diffuser on a light, so that even when the sun is not coming from the Birch Street side, when it's coming from the back side, the translucent panel picks up the light, diffuses it, creating an ambient, soft ambient glow within that staircase, so that there's light all day, even when the sun's on the other side of the building. This basket weave texture is something we want to see as really integral to the experience of the garage, down to the experience that you have at an individual parking space, and then also at night. And we're proposing that there would be a soft grazing light along the front texture of those terracotta fins to accent the texture at night, but also to provide more balance between reduce the glare that customarily comes from inside garages when there's a lot of light inside and no light on the outside. So this is a strategy to balance the light and soften the look at night. From a material detailing standpoint, the basket weave doesn't just change direction vertically and horizontally, but it actually changes in planes. So as you see on the left, parts of it are proud, parts of it are recessed, and then the other materials slide behind, so there's a general kind of shadow boxing effect with the materials. The materials themselves, I have this here, which I can pass around to you. This is our materials board. I'll make that available to you. In description, from left to right, we have metal reinforced terracotta, which is basically brick, fins. We have board formed concrete, cast in place concrete. We have the translucent polycarbonate panels. We have a smooth fiber reinforced concrete in a sand, it's called Sahara, but in a sand color. It's sometimes referred to as Swiss pearl. And then on the right, we have the ivy, which is an integral component of the elevations as well. As they play around the building, this is looking at the Birch Street side. Both the architecture and the landscape site design reinforce this idea that each elevation gets an independent identity, which further helps break down the scale of the garage. On the Birch Street side, there's a more generous pedestrian realm for seating, for planting, the staircase. You can see the play of light and shadow that comes from the terracotta scrim. I'll also point out, in this case, the re-entrant corners on each side. The re-entrant corner on the right has an interesting side benefit that back plane, if you see on the upper right-hand drawing, that back plane lines up with the face where the mural is on the historic, on the nut house. So you're spatially, as you come from Cal Avenue, these planes line up, then the front of the garage steps forward, and between that plane and the forward plane is where the stairs go up. And also the stairs are doing something else interesting that we like, which is that on the right-hand side, it goes to the 1-story height, and it goes up to 3 stories on the left. So the stairs mitigate the scale differential in the neighborhood. Sherman continues this, the basket weave and the syncopated design.
With the permission of the board, since this is a single item in a huge project, shall we let the applicant, the city, continue? Thank you.
I will be brief, about 2 more minutes. Continues, the planting areas at the base there are continuous along the building. They are actually rain gardens. And then there will be a row of trees out, street trees, providing shade and more shadow play along Sherman. The jacaranda side, which you're looking at here, does not have as much area for planting at the base, but we do have areas where we can grow vines, so that there will be an opportunity to grow vines on the back side, on the jacaranda side. And then the birch side, you can see at the base there, we've removed the arcade. The seating area, the re-entrant corner, is on the right, and we've planted at the base there. And you can see the terracotta fins in this location as well. And it's actually nice to look at the top, because you can see the relationship of the column to commercial building on the left and the scale to the Visa building on the right. I'm not going to go into detail on the landscape design. Zoe Astrachan from Interstice is actually here today, and she could answer any more detailed questions you might have. There are our landscape architects. I'll suffice it to say that the plant design also reinforces these independent facades, independent zones for each of the streets, the character of each. And then the site design materials are going to be a continuity of the building. So the precast seating is going to match the terracotta. The unit pavers are going to match the sand of the Swiss pearl. The board form concrete at the planters will match the board form concrete of the building. The pedestrian landscape site elements will be an extension of the building design itself. If need be, Zoe can go into detail on these sections, but this gives you an idea of the cross-section at Ash, the pedestrian cross-section at Birch with the deeper seating area, and the pedestrian cross-section at Sherman. So this project is now, my slideshow is frozen, but in fact that was the last slide. There's just one more. The project is currently at 100% schematic design. We are, the last slide. Our hope today is, well, first of all, we hope that you agree that we have heard what your comments were from the previous go-around. We hope you agree that it is, in fact, an improved building. And our hope is to get a recommendation for approval of this project so we can move into design development on the project and proceed on providing the Cal Avenue Retail District with this important piece of civic infrastructure. So thank you, and I can open it to questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions you would like to ask the applicant before we hear from the public, or do you want to hear from the public next? Okay, I have 4 cards. I beg your pardon. Oh, did you have a question, Osma? Sorry.
Do you know what the floor to ceiling height is for the, floor to bottom of structure height? It wasn't noted.
The floor to the bottom of the structure. Michelle, do we know what that is offhand? I think the floor to floor is 11'6". And the typical beam depth, do you recall? 3 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? You have 3 minutes to speak. You can speak both to the draft EIR and the project itself. The first speaker I have is Jack Morton, to be followed by Christian Pease.
Thank you. Jack Morton, representing the California Merchants Association. First of all, we want to thank both staff and the architect for hearing our concerns about the ash and also responding to the comments of the ARB about the overall appearance of the building. We would have come with great happiness had it not been for one thing. At the last minute, we have learned that the proposal is to take away one whole level of parking, which in my mind should have a major negative impact on the environmental report. An underparked, the whole problem of the area is that there is relatively no parking. Most of the employees can't get a permit, and what we had hoped to be able to do was have that extra 100 parking spaces on the second level become employee parking. So from the merchant's point of view, this project now looks beautiful above ground, but it's sorely underperforms what the expectation of the community was. We have spent lots of time with staff trying to get clear that as this area is densified, majorly densified, the issue of parking is one of the central things that impacts the quality of life. Having people, and I think one of the reports showed that the major need for parking is roughly between 10 and 6. This is an area that has very active appearances from the community to the restaurants, to the businesses, and shorting us on parking sort of undermines the whole point. So while we are grateful for the external appearances, the utility of the building has been majorly impacted by this suggestion at the last minute that we short one level. So whatever comments that the ARB can make, please keep in mind that the impact on the community is the fact that a building that is underperforming its purpose doesn't do what it should do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christian P., so I heard that as a comment on a need for EIR revisiting in light of this proposal.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today to represent the Evergreen Park Parking Committee, and we think this is a lovely design. One of America's great architects said, "Form follows function." We do not believe that you should reduce this floor, as Jack Morton has pointed out. We think this is a false economy. This neighborhood is going to be under extreme pressure for the next decade. Car light housing, new firms moving in, new office buildings already in the pipeline, existing retail, former retail spaces being filled with 4 or 5 times the number of employees they had before, grand boulevards, the list goes on. It was a surprise to us to see in the proposal to remove this level that it could be taken up, the lunchtime crowds could be taken up based on the efficacy of our RPP. This is wishful thinking at best, almost absurd if the consequences weren't so impactful on us. There's already a proposal for the Mayfield RPP to increase the number of employee parking permits by 40. That is going to come before the council on the 29th. This problem is not going to go away. This is a lovely design. Its function is to create parking. Over this transition period, there are people who are hoping for autonomous cars and new transportation modalities and walkability and all that sort of thing. Our neighborhood in this business district is going to be under intense pressure. The businesses need that extra level for their employees and their patrons, and we need it to keep the pressure off of our small neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jessica Roth, to be followed by Mary Ryan.
Hi, I'm business owner on California Avenue, also a Palo Alto resident. 3 things I wanted to point out today is that I'm very, very happy with the design. This is a very large structure going into my neighborhood. I grew up on California Avenue. And the impact of the size of this structure above should represent what it can do with holding as many cars as we possibly can in this space. I would love to see a second stairwell on the Ash side because it is nice for people not to have to walk a whole block over to then return to walk a whole block back if they're trying to reach retailers on the El Camino side of California Avenue. And then I also wanted to point out that a lot of the people that parked in the Evergreen neighborhood have now moved across the tracks under the underpass to the residential California Street side. And I have many customers that are upset about this, and so we are going to have that neighborhood coming and wanting to now put limits on who can park in their neighborhood, and we are going to then be scrunched again on where people can, our employees, our customers can park. So if you could really stress that to staff and city council, really appreciate it. But I'm really happy with the design, and we've been working on getting parking garage for 15 years on California Avenue. Parking is not a new problem, and it's only getting bigger and bigger down there. I mean, I like seeing change in our area. I think we're a smart city. Let's plan for the future, not just try to fix an immediate problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. Mary Ryan? Oh, did I get that backwards?
Good morning. My condominium home fronts on Birch Street, just down the street from where the parking garage is going to be. Currently, there are 2 parking lots that represent 306 spaces between the 2 lots. And there are 12 access points for those 306 spots on 4 different streets. Now we're going to 636 with 1 access point, and that access point is across the street from a residential units. I think that the access point should be down the street, across from commercial, instead of a residential area. I'm concerned about traffic congestion because of this 1 access point versus the current 12. I am worried about air quality when cars are idling, waiting to get into that parking lot because of only 1 access point. And I'm worried about public safety because of the car congestion in that area. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So would the city like to respond to those points?
I would like to respond to the third speaker, Jessica Roth, who asked for a second staircase on Ash. In the staff report packet, page 13, I mentioned that there is now a staircase near Ash opposite the elevator. So it should be quite easy to find. You get a choice, elevator or stair, and you can take the stair on the Ash side.
It's visible on the slide that's up there right now.
That's okay, yeah. It's hard sometimes to read plans. There's so much information in there. Let's see.
The single access point and its location?
Right, so that was a comment that we heard from other folks, and we forwarded that to our environmental consultant who, and actually that comment was anticipated in the draft EIR. There's a paragraph in there about why the access was chosen, where it was based on queuing, and that was provided to those folks. I can forward that email if I can get the email of Ms. Ryan, so she can see what others have seen as far as where to find this in the draft EIR. But so noted, that was a question, and we have a response for that.
Well, perhaps you could give us a brief recap of why that was the choice that was made?
Yes, it had to do with queuing for eastbound traffic, allowing eastbound traffic to turn left into that location. I think it's 90 feet. I don't have the email in front of me, but I can go look for it in the draft EIR. Perfect.
I also would like to bring up Michelle from Watry Design, our parking garage specialist, to answer that.
Michelle Wendler with Watry Design, and we coordinated with the traffic consultant who was doing the traffic impact analysis to review the locations of the entries and exits. The parking lots today, part of the entrance and exits are circulation and the way they circulate partially within the lot to the alley. We analyzed for the number of parking spaces in this building with fan pairs and determined that 1 entrance location and an exit location was enough for the number of parking spaces in the building. And then the location of it was determined based on the street circulation. So what was being described about the left turns and the access coming in from Birch, and the distance that you have on Ash and Birch are very short, and the distance from the intersections is a lot to allow access in those locations, along with the alley at that location also having circulation. So the entrance being on Sherman was driven by the street circulation around the site, and then the location along Sherman was based on the queuing that was analyzed as part of the traffic report.
Thank you.
Just the only other comment from staff on the public comments is that the issue of the subterranean garage possibly losing a level, this is obviously a policy discussion that the City Council is going to have to consider as they evaluate the project. The project that's before you, with all of its levels of subterranean garage, has been evaluated in the environmental impact report. A lesser project or a less impactful project could certainly be evaluated, is contemplated in the analysis of the impacts that are presented. They won't be any worse if the impacts, if the 1 level of subterranean parking is removed. But
The alternative in the draft DIR is one off the top and one off the bottom, right?
Well, even if you don't take one off the top, the analysis of if a determination is made to remove one level of subterranean garage, the impacts will not be any worse than have already been analyzed in the document. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a decision for council to decide.
Thank you. And they're thinking about this on Monday, next Monday, is that right? When is this going to council?
Yeah, I think there is an upcoming discussion.
So council on Monday. Thank you. Okay. Questions from my colleagues?
Yes, I have 3 questions, please. Perhaps first one is for the Public Works Department. The solar panels on the roof of the garage are definitely part of this project, or is this a possible potential future thing?
It's definitely part of this, and the base bid, we plan to include the structure for the PV panels. We're still analyzing options for how the actual panels will be funded, if they'll be privately owned or publicly owned, and how that power generated will be used.
But the panels are fully intended to be part of this structure?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll expand the answer to that just to mention that they are also integrated with the infrastructure of the public safety building, providing a redundant source of power in the event of a disaster. So they're actually seen not just, they have a multiple role.
Thank you. Second question is for the architect. Regarding the grand staircase coming up along Birch Street, as you're going up the stair on the right-hand side, what is the finish on that wall? I think that's the structural concrete wall.
Correct. That's a structural concrete wall that we have revised so that the concrete is concealed. I'm looking for that image right now. The concrete is concealed, and the surface texture is a steel trowel plaster. Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding that image. There we go. It's a smooth steel trowel plaster finish that covers all the concrete below it, and the plaster sample is on the board that we passed around.
Okay, and the intention is that you then get a play of light from the basket weave terracotta?
That you get a play of light, it hosts the light shadows, but it also adds to the brightness in that space, so the diffuse light bouncing off the translucent panel above bounces around in there.
So then I wonder if you could clarify for me, what is the orientation of that wall?
That wall is, on paper, the east side, but it's actually kind of it's a northeast. Yeah, because we're off of the cardinal grid.
So I'm looking at your site plan, and it seems to show true north being more or less within 15 degrees of the orientation of that wall. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, you're reading that correctly.
So the wall's more or less facing north. Okay, thank you. The last question was for the transportation person from Watry Consultants, if we could. Is there a reason there's no access to or from the garage from Jacaranda Lane?
Based on the review with the traffic engineer, Jacaranda is a one-way, and with the other activities going on in that area, they did not believe the access from Jacaranda was going to be an appropriate connection, since it mostly runs, the left turns in from Birch would be a difficult thing to accommodate in that area based on the volume, so they determined that we should not have an access in off of Jacaranda.
Okay, thank you.
And just a further elaboration on your question about the orientation, this rendering is accurate for, I believe it's 9:45 a.m. In August, I believe. I forgot the month, so I apologize. But the idea is there will be morning sun that comes in, and that's representative of morning sun.
Any other questions? Thank you. Alex.
Thank you. I have lots of questions. So, I guess maybe for staff, the traffic report in the draft EIR had 2 recommendations. One was to avoid parking at the ends of the aisles within the garage, and the second was to add crosswalks across Jacaranda Lane. And I was wondering if those are, if from the staff's point of view, if those should be included, or does the staff have a different response or a different way of addressing those concerns? And that was, I think, on page 52.
I gave my draft EIR to.
Yeah, we can, you can circle
person.
back to me in
Yeah.
the answer.
Okay, thank you.
I have other questions too, if you want to. I can move on if you
Yeah,
want.
there was a moment where there were some other parking spaces that were removed. I don't know, Matt might be able to explain that.
Yeah, we
piece of
took out the arcade, right? I think the arcade was taken out along Ash.
Right, and then so there was a rejiggering of parking. Oh, thank you.
And it looks like in the plans, those are the electric vehicle spaces.
So I now have a copy of the draft EIR, or is this the, okay, so this is the parking, sorry.
Yeah, and the traffic report is
impact report, page
52.
52. It's the first bullet? No, second bullet. I need a minute.
Okay, I have other questions.
Okay.
For the architect, are the different floors in the garage going to be color-coded? Like normally in a garage, we color-code it. And it seems, and so, you know, the inner workings of the garage is not my major concern, but it seems like things like the elevator towers are partly visible in, like from the outside. And so, and I've seen a new garage at San Antonio Shopping Center where the color coding was part of the exterior design. It was made like a rainbow. It was a design feature and meant to be seen from far away. So if that, there's that. And then also is the, well, what I mean, should we do it one by one, maybe?
Well,
Let's do it one
currently,
by-
there's no, we do not have a plan for color coding the floors, and we definitely have not proposed any of that color coming to the exterior of the building. The thought on the building was to keep it more of a limited palette. Certainly there, we would look in greater detail in design development for wayfinding, and certainly the signage program would allow us the opportunity to provide a more discrete color coding so people can get oriented and find their cars, but not necessarily become a major architectural element.
Okay, thank you. On lighting, I have two questions. Three questions. One is, you're proposing new street pole lights along Sherman,
Correct.
and they're different than the existing street poles, which are like tall Cobra head
Correct.
light fixtures. And I was wondering if you could explain the selection.
The selection
there.
is based, and I'm going to try to go to that night view right now, is to reinforce the pedestrian environment and bring the canopy of lights to a lower level so that the single-story component of the garage and the pedestrian realm and the canopy of the trees is reinforced, not to light, you know, overlight that area. And then those are supplemented with a more subtle light on the surface of the building. There we go. Should be up here momentarily, I hope. Well, maybe not. But anyway, so yes, the intent is to bring it down for the reasons of pedestrian experience.
Okay, and then there's an existing Cobra head light in the parking lot, which works to, okay, good. To illuminate the alley. And in the current lighting plans, there's nothing shown in the alley. And I was wondering if that's a conscious decision, or is there something else proposed for the alley? And
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to that.
Great. Okay, and then my last question about lighting is, there's one sconce shown in the, near Antonio's Nut House, in like the bicycle parking area?
Correct.
And I was wondering, why is there only one? What is it doing? And
I think if there's only one, that's probably an oversight on our part. There should be more than one. The idea is that bicycle parking area should be illuminated as a continuous area. And it's also a pathway that leads you to the Paseo that's mid-block. It doesn't go all the way because of structural interference, but it goes most of the way there. So I would qualify that as an oversight, and there definitely should be more than one downlight in that area.
okay, and I think my last question is about the stairs that serve the lower levels of the garage.
Yes.
So I don't know how the code works with this, but can they be open staircases, or do they really have to be enclosed for smoke
You want to address
protection?
that? I'll let Michelle answer that.
So the stairs need to be fire rated on the inside of the basement levels. And as we come up into the ground level, we've been able to keep that open since that level is open air. So, but as you do go down, there is walls in the basement levels, yeah.
It's not unlike maybe our outdoor ones here in City Hall.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so I think, I'll comment maybe on that later, but thank you for that answer. Okay. So Amy, did you have any follow-ups on
Yes, I was able to read that section.
Yeah.
It does talk about the provision of signage and/or warning systems to be installed at the entry-exit point to make sure that pedestrians will not be endangered by cars coming and going. So there's no details about that, but certainly that is something that we would look at a staff level to make sure, with transportation and planning, to make sure that they're the minimum size needed to get the job done and be effective.
Okay, I think the warnings were for Sherman, right? Like an audible warning or and then I think there's also one for crosswalks at Jacaranda. Anyway, these are like details. It seems like we could add them as conditions of approval if we get that far today. Okay, that's all the questions that I have at the moment.
Robert, any questions? No. Yes, Osma.
I tried looking for it, but I kind of wanted some more information on rainwater management and harvest, if there's rainwater harvesting in the project.
I'll bring Zoe Astrakhan, our landscape architect, to answer that question.
Good morning. Currently, the planters along Sherman are treating all of the roof water. So there'll be a network of roof water leaders that let out into those individual planters and then spread it the lengthwise of the planters and treat that water. So that planting will have to be at least 30 inches deep, therefore the height of the planters, and then the plant species will be selected accordingly. Is there any other question?
No, that's my only question about that, but I do have two more questions. I read something about public art and that it might be, I was wanting to know the status of the public art, if it's getting moved somewhere, if there's more information on its home in this project.
Yes, Matt Roschke, Public Works. The Community Services Department was unable to draft or come to an agreement with Ball Nogues Studios, who was the selected artist from the selection panel, and because we were so far along, they basically have kind of passed on bringing in an artist for this project. They're currently in the process of selecting an artist for the public safety building, and once that artist is on board, they're going to look at supplemental opportunities for art on this structure. The runner-up in the garage artist selection panel was subsequently selected as the artist for the downtown garage on Lot D on Hamilton and Waverly. So they didn't want to bring in the runner-up for this project and have them working on two garages in town.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is if there's any, in more recent parking garages, maybe this is a question for the parking consultant, is stall availability indicators and parking space availability systems.
Hi, yes. Parking guidance systems are included in the project as part of an overall city objective, so they'll be included in this project as well as being incorporated into other projects in town.
Thank you.
Excuse me, while you're still there, or almost. So I always consider the pinnacle of this the Portland Airport garage, which tells me exactly what's going on before I get there. How will this work? There'll be an external availability and then internal guides and green and red lights? What's it going to be?
Yes, we haven't heard the exact selection from transportation about the exact system, because we're trying to match what's going to be installed in the rest of the town. But the idea is that there's signs at the entry and then signs as you go up, so you know. In this case, because of the circulation pattern, you pretty much drive by each space as you go up the building, because there's only 2 parking bays in the ramp. But there will be an indicator at the ground whether there's parking spaces on level 2, 3, 4 to help you adjust to where you need to go for the parking, and especially if it's full, so you don't go in.
Thank you. Any other questions before we start with comments? So I'd like to begin with comments on the draft EIR. Anybody have some? Peter?
Sure. I'll address my comments here just on the EIR report as it is directed towards both buildings. I find that there's 2 items that potentially need a little more addressing as far as the potential mitigation. One is on the tree removal. The report does mention that there's 11 heritage and protected trees being removed, but as I read it, just seems to say that the city ordinance says they'll be replaced and that's sufficient mitigation. And I think that the report should go into a bit more detail about why that's the case. In any private development, you wouldn't be allowed to remove those trees, so just saying that following the code, I think, is not adequate. It's a significant amount of trees being removed, and I think we should address it in more detail. The second thing, and I suspect there'll be others on the board supporting this, is that when you do this much groundwater pumping, to build 2 stories underground, it's below the water table. It's bound to have an effect on the environment, and I don't see any mention of that in the report. So again, some impact or some effect, some discussion of how we're going to mitigate the impact of the groundwater pumping should be included in the report. Lastly, I have a comment, and I can support it with a dozen or so quotations here, but when I'm looking at chapter 4, which is regarding the aesthetic impact on the building, it seems to me that it doesn't really mention the fact that the board was not terribly pleased with the design of the public safety building, and by saying that essentially the aesthetic impact will be mitigated because the board will approve the design isn't really sufficient. So if I could just start throwing out a bunch of sections perhaps that should be addressed. On page 4.6, the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, there's a line that says the secondary 2-way ramp will be located on Birch Street, etc. It's regarding where the police cars come out onto the street. If I remember right, the board had quite a bit of concern about that particular ramp, and to leave it in the report as a given, I think, is not correct. The first paragraph on page 4.7 says the monopole will visually relate to the pattern of verticals in the PSB's exterior design and mounting on the building to improve its overall visual integration. I don't think that was the board's statement on that, and I think that shouldn't be in the EIR in that way. 3 paragraphs down, it says the PSB, et cetera, carefully focusing on appropriate site planning. Following that, it references 3 concepts that the ARB is going to choose between. I think we were quite clear that none of those were adequate concepts. Rather than waste everybody's time going through it, as I go through this section, there just seems to be repeated references to a design that we didn't really think was going in the right direction, and we should be more careful to be factual and maybe get more references to the design that's going to be built as we go through this. So I'm curious to hear what everybody else thinks, but as I look at the report, just chapter 4 there seems to be missing the mark a little bit. Thank you.
Any other comments?
No, but I did want to indicate that I agree that it seemed like we weren't really happy with the design, and it based on what's written here, we basically were, and you're just going to do some fine tuning to get it to work. So I have to agree pretty much with every point that was mentioned.
Alan?
Okay, so I guess I have two comments. One is in the traffic. Well, I have an overall comment. One is I think it was the draft EIR was done really well. like just all of the explanations in there are done really well compared to other EIRs that I've looked at recently. I'm going to explain things like relatively new things like vehicle miles traveled, right? I think that was done really well. I did see there's something out of date in the transportation impact section on like bike shares. I think that's all changed since last November. Right, the council shifted direction, so that's out of date. On the aesthetic mitigations, my recollection is that, like in the past, say like on big projects like the Stanford Hospital, that we just said that the ARB process was the mitigation. That once you get through the process, then that is it. And so the report itself doesn't necessarily have to spell out exactly what the ARB is going to decide. And so maybe we can sort of separate it out a little bit. And that's all that I have on this one. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, my comments on the EIR, draft EIR. First, I agree with the serious problems with the aesthetics. It has a lot of judgments about the design, which sort of preempt anybody else's analysis. And I don't know what the CEQA solution is, but it certainly contradicts the opinions expressed by the body charged with advising the city on design. So that needs to be reworked in some way, because the statements it makes about the careful thinking of mass and whatnot and careful site plans, I don't believe are true. I mean, they may have done a great deal of thinking, but the result is not acceptable as it presently is there. The other thing is, this would be an opportunity to update the description of the parking structure, which has changed in many, I would say, good ways since this document was prepared. I also think that the discussion of groundwater management is inadequate. I had a question which doesn't need to be answered now, and it may be answered somewhere in the document, but there is a test for whether there's too much shading from a new project, and the shading has to do with light on spaces other than streets between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. From September 21 to March 21st, from equinox to equinox. And I'm just curious as to the source of the test, and I'm also curious as to why we're excluding streets. If this is a citywide standard, I think there's a problem. California Avenue, University Avenue, and I'm sure other streets function as important public spaces. I mean, this is a horrible inversion, but they're the equivalent of malls. I mean, these are outdoor, integrated across the street neighborhoods. It's what we cherish, and the availability of some public light is what makes them places that are attractive to pedestrians. This is one of our two most pedestrian-oriented, pedestrian-focused areas. So I'm concerned both about the test and curious as to where it comes from. I'm also concerned about the tree mitigation. We're removing trees we wouldn't ordinarily allow to be removed. I think they're mostly, are a number of them oaks? Because they're protected trees, right? I want to know where they're going to be mitigated. I think it needs to be close, not something planted far, far away. Basically, are we going to have a net increase in canopy? I think so, but we need a better discussion of that. In terms of construction noise, I was wondering if those hours are adequate for the neighborhood. Then I recall that the farmer's market is Sunday, but again, this is an important commercial neighborhood. It's busy on Saturday. Do we think that's okay? But my biggest noise concern is on impact 13-3, operational noise. I think I read both this and the conditions of approval to say that 78.2 decibels are acceptable for the operation of this facility, and that doesn't seem right and shouldn't be right if it is. And I just would note also in the project itself, on page 21, there are no, on the staff report, there are no urban forestry conditions when I was trying to track this through. So I think It'd be good to revise the project description to reflect the improvements in this particular part of the project, and then address the other issues raised by board members. Okay, is that it for the draft EIR? Okay, let's get on to the more fun part. Comments on the garage itself, please. Who would like to start? Osman.
Yeah, so just kind of coming into this for the first time, sort of, it's true, the first thing I noticed was this beautiful render of the shadow of the trellis on that wall, and then it occurred to me that because of the orientation of the building, it was very questionable. It didn't seem right. So even if it was 9 a.m. in August, that might be the only time where that actually happens. So it might be nice to integrate that more in the south and west facades where the public can actually enjoy that effect that you're going for. Another thing I noticed was there are, inevitably in many parking structures, there are large swaths of sheer walls that, are these kind of grand open spaces. And actually, that's kind of where the public art idea sort of came in my mind. It was like, oh, these could be really nice public art opportunities and could actually enliven the structure. So I don't know if that was considered, but it might actually make these large expanses of blank be really culturally appropriate to Palo Alto and give the residents more ownership of the space. Another thing, actually, maybe this should have been a question, but in analyzing the floor plan, I noticed that with the accessible stalls, there isn't a real clear path of travel for the accessible cars to get to the street. Typically, there's sort of a hatched aisle that shows sort of the path of travel, and that's absent in your floor plan right now. So unless you want to point that out, I couldn't see it.
There's direct access to the street. There's actually breaks in the planting seat wall that provide direct access to the street.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yes, you don't actually have to circulate through the garage.
Okay. Yes, I was like, oh no, where's everyone going?
I wanted to briefly just step back to the public art just to add a couple of layers from the history of this. Originally, the large wall that's facing Birch, we had proposed that be a full height public art site. And that was the original intent, and that was one of the sites that was given to the public artists. Obviously, they would finally choose, but we put that as a preferred site, in part because there's its visibility from across the street would be profound too. When the public art component fell through, that was no longer an option. And there is a remaining sheer wall on Sherman. One of the things and we had actually proposed extensive public art on the Sherman Street side, but one of the factors to consider in that location is there is a public art installation on the Visa building right across the street. And some of the comments we received on some of our initial, because we actually had long on art locations on Sherman, was that you're going to have two public art locations shouting at each other across Sherman. And so as we and to the extent that we are able to bring in public art in subsequent roles, we would probably steer it towards the Birch Street side based on some of those comments. But we do in principle agree with what you're saying. Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, and potentially if you guys decide to reconfigure to do the light and shadow thing on the other sides, then that potentially could work with that. But yeah, I think otherwise the basket weave is aesthetically, it's a good choice. Yeah, that's my comments for now.
Could I mention something in response to the path of travel? If you look at the site plan, ARB 02.01, it's 10 pages into the set, you can see that there are pedestrian paths of travel that go from the ADA accessible pathways to Sherman. There's 4 of those. There's a 5th one that is not indicated to have that feature, so we'll take a look at that. But at least the pedestrians who are parking in those spaces have a path to Sherman sidewalk.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice that break before, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Peter?
Thank you, yes. Overall, I find the building to be handsome and very supportable. In fact, I'd like to comment that I hope you can apply some of the same thinking you've done here regarding neighborhood scale and granularity and pedestrian friendliness to the PSB building. I think that was missing on that structure, and it's wonderful to hear the way you just your thought process in describing the building and the enthusiasm behind it is 180 degrees different than what we heard last time, and I find it appealing. I think the building is going to look wonderful. I find especially removing the arcade was a good move, and I think the grand staircase is a wonderful idea. It'll just make it so much more accessible going in and out, and it'll be friendly, and then the offsetting of the walls by the nut house is a very clever way to do it. I'd like to suggest two things I think the board might be able to ask you to improve on. So one of them is regarding the staircase again. While the idea of a play of light on that wall is fine, I don't think that's going to happen. Your orientation doesn't let that be the case. And it seems to me there might be some way you could treat that large concrete wall more than just a smooth textured plaster. It's a very tall wall with just a plain finish that will at best just have sort of a row of handprints on it where people touch it. And there must be some way we could just liven that up or make it better. Somehow perhaps relating to the idea of this play of light, or what would the shadows be like, something like that. Secondly, I wonder if you could come back to the perspective showing that staircase from across Birch Street. No, not that one. I'm concerned the basket weave patterns, as they follow along the stair right there, they seem to sort of have an arbitrary stepping up at the end of the staircase. And I'm wondering if you couldn't just improve that a little bit more. It's a refinement, it's a small detail, but
Noted.
The way it isn't quite right. It goes without saying that the way you build that terracotta slats is critical. You don't want them to be so frail that they break. These buildings receive really no maintenance, and terracotta is a brittle material, but they look great. My other comment has to do with the circulation in the garage, and I just don't see why you couldn't put a secondary entrance or exit off of Jacaranda Lane back at the opposite corner from where you drive in and out. It seems to me at the expense of one parking stall, maybe two, you could substantially improve the circulation through it. And we did comment on this at the last meeting, that having just one entrance to a 600-car garage, I understand that the transportation guy says it's going to work, but in my experience in life, it just takes one person getting confused about direction, whether they're coming or going, something like that, and it really clogs things up. Almost all the other garages in town that I'm aware of have two, at least, entrances and exits, and it just seems like it's an easy thing to do.
Well, and if I could just respond in brief to that.
I'd rather just go through the chair.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize.
So those are my comments, though. I can support the project. I'd like to see us make those two small shifts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex?
Great, thank you. I am also generally supportive of the project. So I agree with Peter generally about having a second entry exit, and even if we don't do it today or initially, it seems to me that it should be future-proofed, so that at the very least you have a clear span and you don't have columns coming all the way down to the ground, so that we could open it up at a future time if it's needed. Things change over the life of the city, and I would imagine if this is going to be here for 100 years, something's going to change, and it seems to me we should have that option. I also agree with Peter on the stairwell. I think that it's looking good. I think the plaster is better than having concrete. And then again, I just worry about graffiti and dirt and repainting it and whatnot. I think I also agree with Uzma's comment on the shear wall, at least on the one on Sherman. What I've seen on some other on older garages is that they'll do little openings, like a fortress opening, like a castle opening. And I was wondering if something like that is possible. I would also say I was looking at several other public garages, and they have more stuff, and I'm saying like tile base, awnings, little punched openings and whatever. And in a lot of the garages, it can add up a lot of clutter. And it seems counter to what you're proposing to do today. But in a way, it does add like pedestrian amenities. It seems to me in this particular case, since you have the planters along Sherman, that may be enough. But we don't have the landscaping plan, so I couldn't tell you for sure at them today. And we do have a finding about that, a landscape finding. On the stairs that go down to the garage, to the lower levels of the garage, I think my recommendation is, if you can do it, to have them more open at the ground level.
Okay.
I mean, to me, going into like some little dark staircase it's like not desirable. So in any way that you can have it more open and more open to the sidewalk, it'll feel safer, and it'll appear lighter and more open and more welcoming. I think we should address the recommendations in the traffic report about the parking at the aisles and the crosswalks and the audible warning or some sort of warnings at the driveway entrance and exits. We don't have any landscape plans, and we do have findings for that. So I think that has to come back to the board in some way. And then on the lighting, I think we do need to have something along Jacaranda Lane.
Yeah.
I'm generally in support of the massing. I think you've done a great job on the material selection with the terracotta and the board form concrete. And I guess I would, on some of the materials, like say you're proposing like a cement board, like a Swiss pearl.
Swiss pearl, exactly.
Some of these things, in the back of my mind, I was been wondering, it's like, are you proposing like an integral color? And then what happens over time? Would we paint it? And I guess I would say the same thing with the board form concrete. Is there a graffiti coating? Or are we just gonna let it be and paint over it as needed?
In the context that we have it set up, the board for concrete is more vulnerable than the Swiss pearl. The Swiss pearl is pretty much inaccessible. The outer surfaces are.
You see like highway overpasses.
Yeah, I know.
And somehow some people are
if you're motivated, there's a way.
If there's a will, there's a way. And we do have graffiti in town. Usually it gets cleaned up immediately, but it does happen. So anyway, I don't know if we need to go into the nitty-gritty details about that, but I do have concerns about that, because I think it's going to happen someday.
Yeah.
And I did want to agree with the previous comments about the tree mitigation. And it seems for city projects, we want to lead by example, and we're removing all the trees, right? And we don't really know what where they're being replaced. So it doesn't seem to me like we're doing a great job on that.
Robert.
Yeah, I have to go along with the other members that I think it's a big improvement over what we've seen. And I guess I also have, the only area of concern, or at least I think is worth commenting, is that whole idea of the grand stairway and that the adjacent wall. I agree based on, the orientation, that I don't know if you're going to get the play of light that you're looking for. And to me, it's almost, it's going the wrong way, in that a building like this is very large and bulky to begin with. And then what you're doing basically is you've got what, looks to be an 8-foot or so stairway coming out, and then you're creating a trellis in front of it, which adds to the overall bulk of the building. And I guess part of that is also to give more character to the wall behind it. I would almost be tempted to, I'd like to see the trellis go away and actually make more interest in the actual stair itself. The stair right at the moment is sort of blends into the wall adjacent to it. If the stair became the terracotta element, for instance, that climbs up the wall, then you're basically bisecting that large wall, and a lot of the concern about this massive wall goes away. It also then allows you to cut the roof back somewhat, and the overall bulk of the building on that side gets reduced greatly. And really, you're not changing the function because, I understand the overhang or the canopy, but if you're doing it for rain, a canopy that's 40 feet up in the air isn't really going to keep rain off your head all that drastically. And I don't know if that's the intent of it. But I think what it'll do is, like I said, in this case, there's nothing really spectacular about the look of the stair as it relates to the rest of the building. It's not an accent point. It's not, like I said, the big reddish terracotta stair right there, so you can actually point it out. So I think you're missing something, and also adding to the bulk because of it. I agree with the tree removal or that sort of thing, especially, setting a bad example. And overall, this wouldn't be a breaker for me, but I'd love to see a little bit more effort, considering people are calling it the grand stair and all this. To me, there's nothing grand about this stair. You're basically putting a trellis in front of it, then hiding it. So to me, that gets away from the concept of a grand stair. And I pretty much agree with most of the other members, so I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, and thank you for this revised plan. There is so much about it that I really like, and I think that it's clear from the public comment that you've addressed concerns of the neighborhood and the merchants and the people who frequent it and of the board. Somebody at some point today said it wasn't a destination, but of course it is. This is the Union Station of that part of town. This is where those people who use cars, and that's a lot of people, enter the neighborhood. And so I think we're going for a similar kind of experience. In the 60s, peninsula towns put ballot measures on and adopted them, banning parking structures, because they were seen as a symbol, an emblem of overcrowding and urban danger and just generally bad things. And I think with a lot of effort, we've managed to transform that experience in many parts of town, and I hope this continues that project. I like the fact very much that, and this is an odd thing to say about a huge parking garage, that it kind of flies its sustainability flag. I like the rain gardens, I like the highly visible photovoltaics. Those are all good things. I like the fact that we're going to have intelligent wayfinding. I always feel kind of deprived when we don't have it. I'm concerned about how safe it's going to feel to be in the subterranean levels, but I don't really know how you address that. And if that is going to be employee parking, it's going to present an interesting issue for employees getting their cars late at night. One of the things I really like is the way that I think it now looks like a building that's supposed to be in the California Avenue, both commercial and to the south, what do we call that, district, that it integrates both with the office and residential buildings and with Cal Ave itself. I think that's great. With respect to the shear wall we do need a landscape plan, I think, before we can approve this. With respect, for example, to the shear wall on Sherman, whether it works and how it works is going to depend a lot about what's planted there, what kind of tree shadows we get. I don't think there's much that's lovelier than the pattern of light and shade from a tree on a wall, but I don't know what we're going to have there and how it's going to look. I like your overall design, so I'm not particularly interested in additional detailing at this point, but I'm open to the thoughts of my colleagues on this and of you. It is a problem that lovely light that we see on the grand staircase is a rare phenomenon. And I think that means that needs further thought. I don't know if you provide a painted version of that or you do something different. It certainly is true that there are lots of things one can do with a staircase. What I like about what you have is that this is a huge building. It's and the scale of the elements is good. It's big. So I'm open to further thoughts about that, but it's close. And I actually do like the idea of a light diffusing screen up above on both sunny and dark days. I do notice that the staff conditions are not complete, and we don't have a full set of plans. And when I look at what seems to be the critical path here, I know it's a while before we can take this to council, and I would be inclined to ask this to come back one more time, but what are my colleagues' thoughts? Does somebody want to make a motion? Or just chat?
I have a question about the process, if I could. The reason we're pushing to get this approved now is so that they can get into more of a construction drawing phase and get a jump on constructing this? Or is it just to sort of get one more thing out of the way?
Correct. We want to actually break ground on this in October. So yeah, we wanted to fast track construction documents and get them out to bid. Because the escalation that we're still seeing in the market is extreme. So every month is that the public safety building is delayed with the cost estimates that we're seeing right now. It's probably $100,000 to $200,000 a month that we're escalating the project as it drags on.
So addressing my colleagues then, I understand the public safety building will be coming back to us sometime in March. And I'd say there's a chance we're going to continue that to another hearing. If we tie this building to that, they're not going to start in October. And so in reality, we're costing quite a bit more by delaying it. And I think the comments I've heard are all things that could be addressed.
Well, the other way to look at it is, we all take chances. You could start construction documents basically with the way this board feels about the existing project and get 85% of those done and some minor modifications that you leave purposely vague, like the stair or whatever, the wall, something like that. You could do a whole lot of construction, and that isn't going to waste 3 months worth of time while it's just sitting there. So I think we should bring it back because there's some modifications. I'm not happy with, like I said, that one thing. I guess I feel a little bit stronger about it than the rest of the board, so that's fine, but I think there needs to be some redesign on that grand stairway. And I don't think that alone is going to, like I said, will allow you to do 85, 90% of the construction documents, even if that's, vague at the moment. So I wouldn't think, I'd also, because this is a public building, I don't want to get hung up in that, hey, come on, we're in a hurry, you guys have to approve it now because we're on a time schedule.
I have a follow-up for staff on Robert's point. How does this work? The council needs to authorize the next phase, typically. Like on the bicycle bridge, they authorized design development up to whatever 65% of DD. Is that the same process for the garage? I mean, the council needs to approve.
What you're saying is, can they start construction documents?
What do you need in order to start construction documents?
You need some council approval, right? I would imagine. Yes. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Brad Eggleston, Assistant Director of Public Works. These projects are structured a little bit differently than the bike bridge was. I think what you're recalling with that project is that we had to actually take a contract amendment to the council to authorize the next phase of design. With these projects, we have the full design authorized in the current design contract. Right, so there is, I mean, as we've said, as Matt and Mallory have said, we're really wanting to forge ahead with design with an eye to that October breaking ground date. There is a checkpoint with the council where we would ask them to authorize the EIR and approve the record of land use for the project. I'm not sure what that would mean in terms of at any point that we would pause with the construction documents process before getting to council.
With respect, I don't think we've been dragging the project here. The public comment period on the draft EIR doesn't even end to February 22nd. I think the consensus here is that we think it's a good building. We think it needs a little more work, and I definitely think we need some more careful looking at the conditions, which I do not think are not ready to go. And I'm concerned that this is a very big project, and I don't want to miss something because we're trying to amend conditions or add conditions on the fly. So what would you suggest as a procedure? You're good at this.
Well, so I think that just taking a step back, I think the board has had this sort of informal interest in wanting to move city projects forward at 2 meetings. This is your 2nd meeting. I've heard, a number of comments. A lot of it is positive, though maybe perhaps not unanimously positive about the project. The things that I have heard, I think could easily be addressed, here after this point without subcommittee, and then some points with subcommittee. The grand stair, and I understand there's maybe some objection to the term, but that stairway is not going to move. There's treatments and elements that may be modified to enhance the, the lighting effect that the board has talked about. I think that's something that could be addressed in subcommittee. I think that that wall, the large plaster wall, is something that may benefit from a little bit more discussion today, and if we can give some clear direction to subcommittee members to explore that, I think that could be helpful. The landscaping, we don't try to, landscaping is an element of the design. We don't want to hide the building with landscape. Landscaping shouldn't be the reason why a building gets approved or doesn't approve. It's supposed to enhance and improve the design, but it's not the reason why. I think that's something that we can come back in subcommittee or even later to the board and have a discussion about landscaping. I think there's, and as far as the conditions go, I think we're probably 98% there. The reason we added that in the staff report is because I think that we're just fine-tuning a few things related to the environmental analysis, which is frankly going to change even if you continue this over time as we get closer to the city council. I think all things considered, from a staff perspective, we are very mindful of the cost not only to, other applicants that have to go through the process. We want to streamline and be efficient in our review. But the city also has an expense that it's incurring, and that has, potentially, broader implications from other. As we spend more money to building the parking structure, there's less funds available for other capital improvements that we want to advance. So
I think
our
we
interest
all
is to move
share
it
the
forward.
view that it's important to do what we can to expedite this. What I'm trying to figure out is, I don't think we'll check and see, but I don't think we have no landscape plans, for example. How are we to make our findings in the absence of those plans?
You condition it to come back. You can condition the landscape plans to come back. That's not, this is a...
So this is an approval subject to further review by the ARB?
You're approving that, you would be recommending approval of the project with a condition that the landscape plans return to the board.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Could I just mention that there is a landscape concept that show where trees are to be located, where shrubs are to be located, and specify the tree species. I think what's missing is, the smaller level plantings, the smaller plants. Right?
Okay, colleagues, first of all, are we generally supportive of the idea of trying to put together a motion that approves this project subject to further review by us?
Well, what does that mean?
Let's just be more specific. I'm willing to approve the project today with all of the items that have been previously mentioned coming back to subcommittee. And I'm actually okay with the staircase. I think I disagree with Robert, but I'm fine with, if you want to tinker with it. I think I would be willing to have that, how do we say, like consider revising the staircase. But it seems to me that the grand staircase issue had, there were safety issues regarding the police station. So I imagine that they're going to want some sort of screen wall there. And so anyway, it seems to me all of these things to me are could be addressed in the subcommittee.
I think, I was going to say, my major, I mean, I agree mostly with the board members. I think regarding the stair, it's true, I did feel that it was missing some design thought. Part of it could be mitigated in many ways. I understand there was something wrong with the public art integration, but that doesn't mean that the architect or the designer can't take some initiative and, improve the view from the ground in some way that, you kind of have a basket weave, fractal skin that couldn't somehow integrate either texturally or paint or something to improve it. As it stands right now, it's true that right now it is missing that, and so it would be worth seeing again.
The way I see it is that as you said, we're almost there. I would prefer to see it come back to a date certain, and that way you can determine how that fits into the schedule and limit it to just those items that we've talked about, the stair, a couple of other items, and, if it can be done fairly quickly, and I don't see that that's going to interfere with the overall scheme of things. Like I said, the stair is going to stay where it is, so from a structural standpoint or a construction document standpoint, that's not going to change. It's going to be how it's addressed. And I think it's a fairly big element of that corner, and I think we need to do something other than a subcommittee.
I agree with Robert on that.
And I agree too, so that's 3 votes for that process. Well, let's see if we can focus down tight on what it is we'd like to have further work on. So I have that we need a landscaping plan. I would like further details on what the actual operational noise level that the city's willing to commit to is. The one that we have seems oddly high. What would you say, let's see, Peter, I've forgotten what your points were. They're in my notes here somewhere. What else did you want to add? Oh, somebody wanted crosswalks indicated on Jacaranda, is that right?
That's fairly minor.
Okay.
No.
Do you want any additional work on lighting?
It was only, actually, I wanted the staff to respond to the recommendations in the traffic report.
But at the same time, we could get additional completed detail on lighting. That was a gap.
No, I think their lighting is there, but
it's just gaps in the plan.
Well, there's nothing addressing lighting Jacaranda Lane.
I'm just trying to avoid further referrals to subcommittee.
I basically think the grand stair, the trellis, and the concrete wall behind it need some further clarification or refinement.
Well, so before we talk about that, anything else I've left off this list?
At least 2 of us asked about the secondary exit onto Jacaranda Lane.
Okay,
Is there more
planning
support?
for a
Good
possible
point.
future exit.
Or creating one right now.
Exit on Jacaranda Lane. What else?
Be more information on the tree.
Yeah,
removal.
landscaping plan, more tree. And I will tell you, if this is part of the landscaping plan, I'm going to be looking for benches that people who don't have great muscle tone can step up from. In other words, armrests, something that lets people lever themselves up from benches, from the seating. Anything else? Is that it? I have such illegible notes here. We're happy with the rainwater harvesting. I think could we get more statements of consensus on the grand staircase? Robert's presented the view that it needs significant change. What's the view of the rest of you? Alex?
Yeah, I don't think I agree.
Okay. Do you want anything? You good?
No, I think I previously stated my concern was mostly just keeping the plaster wall.
So sturdy materials.
Clean. So like hard trowel plaster typically shows cracks. I'm not sure if you were proposing to paint it or not. Oftentimes the paint is used to hide the cracks. Public buildings and garages usually get pretty grungy, and they're not spick and span, nice and clean. And so those are my general concerns about the plaster wall.
Peter? Okay, sorry. Peter?
Well, I think I stated my concern. That wall, absent the play of light, is just going to be a big blank wall that's getting dirty. And so I'd rather not tell the architect how to resolve that issue, but I think it needs resolution or refinement maybe.
So the issue is, except at 8:30 in the morning, it's going to be too big and too blank and too vulnerable.
It's in shade 90% of the day, 90% of the year.
I think that's probably pretty clear.
And then I also felt that the detailing of the basket weave terracotta below the stair needed further thought.
Okay.
I think the architect would agree it needs further thought.
Okay.
Just giving them some space to do that. Those are my two issues on the staircase.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Peter and Robert on that. Yeah, it's kind of, it could need more thought. It's true that it won't look like that, and so it would be good to just know more about the design intent. And it's a nice effect, so it'd be nice to see if it could be incorporated somewhere where it could happen, and also just more thought on the big blank walls as well. That's sort of my thing.
Thanks. So I'm not in favor of relocating the lattice particularly. I like this approach, but I do understand that it's not going to work as shown, and that we need to figure out, or the architect needs to tell us how to address that. So I've got landscaping, more good information about how the tree loss is going to be really well mitigated, assurances that the operational noise is going to be at some level that's attractive to people in the neighborhood walking by. Perhaps some corrections of omissions on the lighting plan and a plan for lighting on Jacaranda Lane. Either an exit or plan for a possible future exit on Jacaranda Lane. And some, what's the word, refinement? Some further thinking on how to make the grand staircase wall sturdy and as interesting as it appears in this elevation. So would somebody like to make a motion to is there a date that this could come back to us?
Yeah, we'll look at a date, but can I offer just another staff perspective based on the motion? And I don't want to be argumentative about this, but I just want to be clear about what the motion is and what we're doing. As I hear the comments that we're being asked to come back, there is the landscape plan, which this board has routinely conditioned as a condition for return. So I don't see a problem with the landscape plan not being fully developed at this point. There's the operational noise level issue that's been addressed. We don't believe that this is going to operate any differently than any other parking structure that we have in the city. But moreover, that's an environmental point. We've heard the comment. It's going to be addressed in the environmental impact report. And if there's additional mitigations that are required, we would address that. The tree removal, the trees are going to be removed. I understand there's a concern about the mitigation, about how that might be addressed. That too is a EIR point. We've heard the comment. We're going to study it. We'll respond to it in the final environmental impact report. I don't know why the project would have to be continued on that point alone. I heard a comment about the rainwater harvesting. It's a technical detail that that can be worked out. It sounds like the applicant has a plan for addressing that. Lighting plan on Jacaranda Lane, again, a detail that the board consistently has moved to subcommittee to discuss lighting. This seems like a very discrete element related to one aspect of the project. There was a comment about the exit on Jacaranda Lane. Staff believes this is infeasible for the project design due to the interior ramping of the project. So we don't feel like we're going to be able to come back with any changes to that feature. There was a detailing about the basket wave and the terracotta. We've heard some comments about that. I think this is a detail that was expressed as something that can be easily addressed. It sounds like the architect has an idea of how to address that. And the final component has to do with the refinement of the staircase, where we've heard ranging views from I don't like it to it's good, how's the plaster going to work? And I think that's the one area that we could probably benefit from some further board discussion. If the board can't come to a perspective of how to address that, then I don't know what continuing that is going to do. If there are some specific comments that can be given to the applicant so we can come back to a subcommittee to address that wall, then I think we should do that. But of all the comments or all the reasons that I've heard for continuing this item and coming back, I don't think any one of them rise to that level of a need to return to the board. So I just want to offer that in the interest of all the things that have been stated before.
Thank you. One of the things that's perplexing me is that the issues that you've described as environmental carry over to the conditions of approval of the project.
And we acknowledge that if there's any mitigations that need to be incorporated, those will necessarily be a part of our conditions of approval. I mean, I view this more of it as an administrative component for us to address in how we frame and address the conditions. In fact, we noted in the staff report that even if the board were to approve it today or continue it, we still may be modifying some of these conditions of approval as the project moves forward to the city council.
And planning commission too. Right.
Planning Commission is going to be looking at the environmental impact report, but also the text amendment that is associated with the project, but they're not going to be looking at the details of the project.
Thank you. So you're asking us, explain to me what 78.2 decibels sounds like.
So I just want to be clear, and I can grab the page, I don't have it in front of me, but
it's page 14.
Yesterday when we were discussing this, though, the operational numbers are closer to 52. So we'll grab the page and find that answer for you.
Great, because as it stands, we're supposed to be approving noise up to that level, which I wouldn't be able to do. So I wouldn't summarize our concerns quite the way that staff has, but I understand their view. We could satisfy the operational noise problem by changing that condition to something more suitable. We still don't have any transportation conditions, and we still don't have any, that's on page 15, and we still don't have any public works urban forestry conditions on page 21.
Can I clarify something there?
Sure.
The transportation staff member has been intimately involved with the redesigns that have been coming through, and they have no conditions at this point. We can add a condition about that. Come back and let's see the signs for the the signage that's going to be coming forward related to the safety at the entrance.
I'll see if anybody wants that. Thank you. So we just put none rather than to be determined.
Sure. I was hoping I would get something this week, but and then the other was the urban forestry mitigation measure 6.2, I think it is. Does have some specificity as to what the urban forestry folks want back, and Dave Doctor retired. We don't have any conditions from urban forestry at this time. We do have a mitigation measure that's fairly specific.
Thank you. Out of our list of 5 items, we could change that operational noise condition down to a lower level?
So if you'd like, we do have the environmental consultant here.
Yes. My name's Ray Pendro from MIG.
Hi.
We worked on the EIR with city staff.
Thank you.
The operational noise standards are based on the city municipal code.
Right.
and the number you're quoting is the sound of the ventilation fan at the north end of the parking garage. So I will give a very brief summary just by reading 2 sentences from page 13-29 of the EIR. The paragraph in the middle, to just, I hope this helps a little bit. It's, of course, it's just a summary of a full chapter. It says, the results of the calculation indicate the parking garage would result in noise levels of 52.8 decibels at a distance of 50 feet from the building, which is approximately 10 decibels lower than the existing noise on that street, which is approximately 63 decibels. So the operation of the parking garage at 50 feet from the fan, the exhaust fans for the basement, would actually be 10 decibels less than the decibel level of the street traffic driving by the garage.
This is good. Remind me again where they are?
Page 13-20.
No, I'm on page 13, where they are in the building.
Oh, they're on the north edge of the parking garage near Jacaranda Lane.
Jacaranda. And what level vertically?
I don't have the design of that, but it's for the garages, so it would be near the alley.
Right.
It's for the basement level.
Right. And so, where does it exhaust?
Well, the fan, I'm not designing a parking garage, Michelle.
I'm sure
but-
somebody knows.
But it is in the alley behind the
Thank you.
elevator.
The exhaust shafts are adjacent to the elevator towers, and they go all the way to the top.
Okay. So this is nice to know. I did read the code, I did read the new noise element, and then I read our condition of approval, which was not reassuring. So can we change that? Why doesn't staff suggest some language?
Are you talking about noise mitigation 13.1? That's on
I am
packet
talking
page 30?
about, well, there's that, and then, I don't know that we can't exactly rewrite the mitigation measure for a document that we're not. I figured that's what it says in the EIR, but when we have our own conditions of approval, it would be a lower noise level that we'd be tolerating. Whatever you want to put it is fine with me.
Okay, so add a noise condition to the planning conditions.
Which essentially says that the noise level of the equipment will not exceed whatever you're willing to commit to.
Well, I think we just need to say that the project shall operate in compliance with the city's noise ordinance. I mean, that's ultimately what we're looking for, and we believe that can be achieved.
Not when you tell me that it's 78.2 decibels. I mean, is there a problem that I'm not seeing here? I mean, I know there are logarithmic scales and all that, but is there any problem with committing to a slightly lower level? This is a part of the city that doesn't show up on any noise contours. This is a relatively quiet part of the city.
Okay, but as I'm understanding it, you're not asking for it to operate lower than the city's noise level, right? You're asking it to be in compliance with the city's noise ordinance.
I'm asking it to operate in a way that's consistent with people being comfortable walking around it.
But, I mean, the standard is the city's noise ordinance. I mean, that should be the standard for review. And so if we're saying that the project will meet the city's noise ordinance.
So my question is there a lower number that we can commit to?
We can study that and get, send the board a comment on that, but it's unprecedented for us to.
When we review buildings, we don't say you comply with the quantitative standards of the city and therefore you're approved. We wouldn't exist if that was one of the things we did. And I confess that part of my problem is just confusion that we would say in our ordinance that decibel level was acceptable. It seems very high to me.
Okay, again.
I am willing to let this point go if I have no agreement from my colleagues.
I'll just point out, I believe, where the number comes from. It's mitigation 13-3, operational noise. It's the second bullet. And in combination with the information I gave earlier, 78.2 decibels is the decibel level at the location of the ventilation fans, which it's page 13-32, the second bullet. So that noise level disperses over distance.
And if we were a private project as opposed to a public project, we'd be held to a stricter standard? Under our ordinance?
No, the same
No?
standard applies
Okay.
for both projects.
Because when I was looking at the exceptions, it appeared to say they got 15 decibels and we got more.
When it seems to me,
I'll let it go.
if we just eliminated that last clause, which says, which is estimated to be, just strike that from the condition of approval, we'd all be happy with this.
All right, we'll do that. That's page 14. It's the
Which is
second full paragraph after the second bullet. Okay. So that takes care of that one. That leaves the landscaping plan. Oh, let's take the next. So with respect to either building or planning for an exit on Jacaranda Lane, staff believes that that's something they would say no to. Is that right? It can't be done?
From my point of view is, I was thinking there would be a second exit somewhere else. It wouldn't have to be on Jacaranda Lane. There are other, there are city garages in, off of Castor Street in Mountain View that have exits onto the alley, one-way alleys, and they work. And I don't think that it seems to me that the traffic study indicates that people are coming from all directions, and they would not necessarily be coming from the opposite lane on Birch, making a left turn into the garage. You could circle around the block around California, turn right on Birch, and go right into the alley. So it seems to me that we should have some flexibility.
So then what we are asking to see is a secondary entrance or exit, and/or exit?
In my mind, well, I will let Peter speak to this. My mind is just, it would not necessarily have to be implemented initially.
I agree with what Alex is saying. If we just ask them to eliminate that one post, then time will prove out whether the exit is necessary.
So revise the design to make possible a future exit
I suppose we
or
should
entrance.
verify with the architect if that can be done, but I've got to believe it's possible. But I really think we want to move this along and not keep negotiating these small things, but
But if we do this discussion and get these hammered out today, it will perhaps advance the project.
Subject to not actually being a traffic engineer, but a parking designer. But where you're talking about is coming down the ramp to the right of the elevator, and there's the elevator and vent shaft, and then there's a column, and then there's a second column. For a single exit-only lane and not having an entrance, the space between the two columns would be wide enough without actually removing the column to allow a potential future right-hand turn lane into Jacaranda, assuming that it would be consistent in the traffic impact analysis, which I can't speak to.
with all respect, the staff already mentioned they're concerned about it being proximate to the top of the ramp, and I'd prefer to see us have more latitude with a larger space so that we don't create a dangerous situation. It seems to me, again, if it's possible to remove one column at the lower corner there, then we allow all sorts of future possibilities at really no cost.
Yeah, and it's not impossible to remove a column. We can evaluate the column spacing and see how we can make that, and do the turning diagrams to show how that would work.
So, I'm sorry, so
If that's what it takes to get you approved today, is that a fair deal?
Yeah.
So Board,
If staff is supportive.
Board, if I may, it sounds like, so there's interest in wanting to have having an additional egress only, right? Egress, or ingress or egress?
Look, I've seen several garages in San Jose where they've had, like at Santana Row and also downtown, near the Martin Luther King library. And there are issues. There's basically what happens is in this type of garage, if one space opens up close to the entrance and one car stops, it blocks all other traffic. And that person could take 5 minutes to get out of their car. And it's been a problem in other garages, and they've had to restripe the one in Santana Row. And so to me, it's an issue, and it seems to me I'm only arguing for flexibility for something to be changed
And I'm trying to get
in the future.
I'm trying to get the board there. So just to be clear, you're saying ingress, egress from Jacaranda or anywhere?
I'm just saying anywhere.
Okay.
And
so
it could be either egress or.
Okay. So. Yeah. Okay, so then the condition that the board could consider is that you recommend that the city council consider an additional ingress or egress opportunity, either now or planned for a future ingress opportunity. And then in the interim, the architect and staff could explore where those possibilities exist, present those to the city council, and the council could say, yes, we think that's a good idea. Let's either do it now or let's plan for it. Or, at least you're teeing up that you're getting your interest across in the recommendation to the council. Staff's doing the work in the meantime. Council makes the decision as to what to do with it.
With all respect, Jonathan, that's too much detail for the council to get into. That's why we're here, is to give them a firmer direction. It should be there or it shouldn't. And I feel very uncomfortable just leaving that to council. They generally don't, it's just too much detail for them to get into whether you have a column.
And I'm just responding to what the board had. I heard plan for it.
I think we're asking that plan be made now, in a revision to this plan before us.
Okay, so staff shall plan for an additional ingress or egress opportunity.
I think the motion I have in the back of my head is that we recommend approval subject to the following conditions. One, that the plans be revised to show a potential ingress/egress in addition to the existing one. Any other conditions that we want? I think that the landscape plan be prepared and reviewed by the board for approval. That revised materials, somebody phrased the grand staircase request for me.
I don't think we're in agreement on that, on the staircase.
Okay, well, let's see. Give me your point of view. Somebody give me their point of view.
Perhaps just further design development on the skin and the staircase.
I think we should be more, I think at this point, this is already our second hearing on this, that we should be fairly specific. I think Peter's been specific that it's below the staircase.
Maybe we could go backwards. So Robert has suggested removing the screen and taking a different approach. Does anybody else support that approach?
I do not support that.
No, I don't support that. Sorry, Robert.
I do not support that.
So that one's off the table. So we're talking about something else. Peter.
I'm just still trying to get my head around. Robert made what I thought was a convincing argument why we should just continue this project. We were about to do that, and then the staff made an argument why we should move forward with it. And I guess I want to hear if Robert is convinced by staff's argument that we should be looking for a way to just get this out today rather than just continue it.
Well, I guess I'm willing to just say, fine, I'll just vote against it. I mean, that's very simple. No, I mean, if we want to be realistic about this, I feel like we're being bulldozed to make a decision today. And the reality of it is, I don't see that if this comes back to a date certain, that it's going to modify the schedule of the project. Because you can keep going with the construction documents, even if you change the way I want the stair, or you don't do that, that's not going to change the construction documents. And that's going to be the biggest time frame. And all these other things that need to be done are going to happen while they're doing the construction documents. And if they come back to, other than, well, we can't get it done for 3 months to get the redesign done, a lot of it's going to be on the design team, how quickly they can respond. So like I said, the easiest solution would just be, I'm unhappy with the design. What's this thing? I'm unhappy with the design of the stair. I think it's trying to do something and it's not very successful. Obviously, I'm in the minority on that, so that's fine. These projects don't have to go 5-0.
Thank you. I agree. I'm having a hard time understanding why this is a critical path, but whether we bring it back not having voted yes, or we bring it back having voted yes with conditions, we still need to define what we want from the designer. So I'm asking for a consensus, a majority consensus, not unanimity on what you'd like to see back from the designer and the architect on the staircase.
For the sake of forward motion on this, may I offer my interpretation of what I've heard, and you can
Certainly.
make this sounds good. So the removal of the basket weave aside, because I see that as a standalone piece, the parts that I understood, which and fully support, is the design development of two key components. One, the wall behind the stair, and two, the experience when the sun isn't cascading in from that side of the building. It will appear like this sometimes, but there are the majority of the times that it will not. And so the few components that I heard that need design development are, Board Member Liu mentioned durability and cleaning and what it's like down at the level. Board Member Thompson mentioned the specularity, the light, the fact that it has during a certain time of day a beautiful specularity, but then when the sun goes away it becomes flatter. Are there ways that you can do that? Board Member Balte mentioned about, well, can you simulate what the light might be doing during the times the light isn't actually there, that you actually kind of have a continuity of experience even though that you don't have continuity of light. So from our perspective, that would translate to a surface development in durability and specularity of that wall, get some design interest, so it's interesting even when the light's directly not on it. I actually have a question that I'd like to pose to the board related to that. Is there an openness to using artificial lighting in the evenings in such a way that we're using on the scrim, on the Sherman side, whereby there could be shadows that are recreated on the walls in the evening? That's a question for discussion. But the bigger picture is we not only I think understand the need to design, develop that portion further, but are enthusiastic about it. And I think there's all sorts of great things that we can do that are relatively simple, just need more development.
Could you get them done in time to return on March 1st?
I don't want to influence necessarily the direction. We will proceed at whatever pace is required for how everybody approves,
February 15th, is that too soon?
I can offer thoughts right now that immediately come to mind that, all right.
Go that far today, but
Okay.
Thank you, this is helpful.
So what do you want?
Can I have a straw vote? Who would like to continue this? Just raise your hand if you want to continue it for another meeting. Okay. I'm going to suggest that we, and staff can tell me whether this is a feasible motion or not, that we recommend, and our recommendation in this one is to the city council, not the director, is that right? So, actually, the big design issue is how many floors you're going to have underground, right? That's the big design question that's up in the air.
That's not a design question.
No, not for us, but in terms of construction drawings.
I wouldn't even have that conversation. It's not relevant to the board's.
It has nothing to do with the critical path. Because we would prefer, I think, to continue this whole thing and see it one more time. You have strongly urged that we not do that. It's been suggested that this would interfere with the moving forward of the construction drawings. There's a certain amount of skepticism about that comment or point of view. So that leaves us in a funny place. So Alex, you have a good history of the board. Do we make motions to recommend approval subject to bringing it back to the board as a whole for further consideration of certain aspects of the project?
Say that again.
You're saying to
Well,
approve?
I know we
can't-
approve things
you wanna
subject to
approve it-
referral to subcommittee, but
Right.
I don't
You want it
want
to
this to
come-
go to subcommittee.
You want it to come back to the full board?
I think these issues are important.
Well, then it needs, let's
Let's just
then it just has
continue
to, well, then it just has to come back to the board. I mean,
Fine. Okay.
I think you just have to bite, I think the majority needs to bite the bullet then.
No, I agree. You either approve it and then bring it back to subcommittee.
Okay.
Or you bring it back to the full board.
Got
It's
it.
one of those two options.
All right.
Or you can also condition it for staff to follow up on items.
Right. Okay, well, I would entertain a motion to continue this matter. And if nobody wants to make that motion, I will make it. Okay, I move that this matter be continued and returned to us with the plan revised to show a possible second entrance or exit that could be designed, that could be implemented in the future, that it include design development with respect to the grand staircase, leaving in place the screen on the top, the screen in front of the building, but that the, learn a new word every meeting, with further development to consider specularity, and in particular the durability of these materials in light of the fact that the shadow interest will only be available in very limited times and with a full landscape plan. Is there a second?
Can I add something to that? Or-
Well, not unless there's a second.
Oh, I second.
Okay. Would anybody like to make an amendment?
Can I make an amendment that the next time this project is presented, that multiple times of day are shown on a single view to see how the sun changes over time?
You thinking just for the
It's for the elevation.
staircase face or all of them?
I'll leave that up to the architect, but definitely, definitely the staircase, but other elevations are encouraged.
Is there a second? Oh, I would have to accept it. I don't accept it. Thanks.
Okay.
Is there a second? Okay. All right. Any comment before we vote?
I have one.
Yes.
You had also wanted the condition changed for the decibel levels.
Right.
So is that part of your motion as well?
Well, my motion is that it would come back, but yeah, I would, yeah, that was the deletion of the estimated 78.2
Yeah,
decibels
okay.
on page 14. And I would also expect completion of the omitted findings.
Thanks. And can I have 1 second to meet with staff to talk about dates? Because right now it's not continued to a date certain. So
That's sure.
So if we can make the motion to, if this motion is passed, we would ask that it be continued to a date certain of March 1st.
I'm willing to accept that. Is the seconder?
Yes, I am.
Any further comment before we vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. I know this is difficult. I know that it's a complicated project, but I think we think it's going to be great, and enormous progress has been made. Sorry we couldn't give you everything you wanted, but we'll get there. There is no study session. We don't have any minutes, do we? No minutes to approve.
No.
We have 2 subcommittee items, and they are 1451 Middlefield, the Junior Museum and Zoo, and 2120 Staunton Court. And the subcommittee will be Vice Chair Balte and Board Member Liu. Anything else before we adjourn? Board member questions, comments, or announcements?
I'm afraid I'm going to miss the February 15th meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay. Going to have a really big Valentine's Day, are you? I just wanted to say that the revised comprehensive plan is now available online. We got a notice about the link, and if you want a physical copy, speak to staff. Thanks. We had the draft, yes. It's probably pretty close. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.